Everyone, welcome to part 2 of the Macroorganism Diversity Lab. In part 2, we are going to focus on the wide and wondrous world of fungus, so kingdom fungi. In this particular PowerPoint, all photos and videos were done by me unless I otherwise credit them. Excuse me. You should have already read the background on the two largest different groups of fungi. That includes the sac fungi, which is phylum Ascomycota. There's over 64,000 species in that group. That includes things like morels, if I have any mushroom hunters out there. This is also going to include a lot of very small species like yeast, penicillium, which is what produces penicillin, the antibiotic, and one of the three species that we're going to focus on today, the green stain fungus. All the other species we're going to be looking at are parts of the club fungi, which is Basidiomycota. Both of these groups are named for reproductive structures. Ascomycota has a sac-shaped structure, hence sac fungi, while Basidiomycota has a club-shaped structure, hence club fungi. This Frost's bolete, which was taken here on campus on our nature trails, is an example of what we would consider a typical mushroom, and that's almost all of those are in the club fungi or Basidiomycota group. This is a smaller group, but it doesn't contain a wide diversity of species, about 15,000 different ones. These are coral species, and they come in lots of different colors, and sometimes the tips, as we can see right here, have lots of fine branching, and sometimes they're very blunt. That can be a distinguishing characteristic. If you want to head out to look for these, the best time to find them is September. In fact, for most mushroom species in Michigan, late fall is better than summer or spring, though we definitely have some exceptions to the rules. Also in the club fungus group are turkey tails. Turkey tails are a type of shelf mushroom, and they're very common in our woods. You can find them growing from spring to fall, and they're one of the few mushrooms that will actually last multiple seasons. So they will actually grow 2 or 3 years, and then they dry and die right on the wood that they're decomposing, and so you'll actually see these for quite a while. The dead ones will be quite faded, almost bleached out, but the living ones will still retain a lot of color, and we can see there's quite a bit of diversity in color here, and that's actually where they get their scientific name from. Trametes versicolor refers to the fact that there's lots of different shades visible. These are not an edible species, but they are of interest to scientists because they're actually studying different species of turkey tail for their anti-cancer properties. All right. The Russella is the first of the 3 species that you are going to be responsible for recognizing and knowing a little bit of background information on. So Russella gets its name from russus, which is red in Latin, but interestingly they can be bright red like the picture on the right, and that happens to be a preserved specimen that we keep in the lab room, or they can be purplish and even other shades. Purple is the color that light purple, almost violet, is what you're seeing on the left side of your screen. And when they first emerge from the ground, they do grow out of the ground. They don't grow out of decaying wood like some mushrooms do. They almost look puffball in shape, or kind of, the actual term is they're called a button. And then the cap sort of springs open and you'll be able to see the stem underneath. Let's look at some more pictures. This picture here on the right is actually taken from the field guide, but it's a very typical picture of a Russella. So that bright red cap covering, and there's some good information that might be useful as you fill in your notes into your lab notebooks here from this guide. You can pause the video if you need to, or here's a second page. And what I like about this one is that it's able to show us the various in color, purple versus red. This page talks about how some of these are toxic. If we go back one, this is a very toxic species, but some of these ones are actually edible. So unless you really know your stuff, you shouldn't risk it. But pretty much good rule of thumb with any mushrooms. Okay. What are you going to look for when you're walking through the woods on the MCC campus through our nature trails? So first of all, it needs to be like September or October. You're going to look for what looks kind of like a red ball. So we can see that right here. It emerges from the ground, might be purple. And then you're going to look to see that that cap sort of indents. It almost looks like the inside of a bowl. And the cap colors pink, red, purple, all of those are going to be Russellas. The gills, which we can see right here in the picture, they're very white and quite brittle. In fact, another common name for the Russella group is brittle gills. And the stem colors are going to vary. They're usually pale, but as we can see in the picture, they're kind of white to pinkish. So Russella is the first one you have to know, and Russella is actually the genus name. There's lots of different common names, but as a group we refer to them as the Russellas or the brittle gills. The second species that you need to know is the green stain. So if we look over here, this is an example of a piece of dead wood in our MCC nature trails, and this is called green stain fungus, which I find really interesting because it's actually blue to my eyeballs and probably to most of your eyeballs. So I'm going to start. This is a video I took on the trails back in the summertime, and it'll start going here. I'm going to keep talking. I didn't narrate the video. So as you can see, it's quite widely spread across the surface of this very old piece of wood. One of the things that will, oh, I thought the video was going to keep playing. Okay, there it goes. It'll start again. One of the things that you can see in September or October are the fruiting bodies. So in mushrooms, or when we're talking about fungus, these tiny little guys, these are like smaller than the tip of your finger. This will sprout from what you're seeing up here in the video in the months of September and October. This is also where the other common name for this comes from. So it's most commonly referred to as green stain fungus, but it can be called green elf cup, which I think is particularly cute, or green wood cup. And this wood used to be highly desirable because they would collect it and they would use it in artwork. So all of this bluish green that you see in the back is actually the stained wood, stained by the presence of this particular fungus. If you want to learn more about the green stain fungus, these are two of my favorite websites for mushroom information. So mushroomexpert.com and Tom Volk Fungi. So those links are live if you click in the PowerPoint. And the last or third species you need to know isn't actually a fungus at all, but a lichen. And so when you're walking through the woods, you would see a large tree like this, and you would see these blotches of color growing on, or here's a closer magnification of one. So let's listen as we learn a little bit about what lichens actually are. This gorgeous specimen is a lichen. A lichen, as much as it might look green to you, is not a plant. A lichen is actually a symbiotic organism made up of typically a fungal partner that provides the housing or body structure, and a photosynthetic partner, most often an algae or a bacteria, that does all the food processing. These two work together to survive. They typically grow on trees, rocks, any surface. They do not hurt the item that they're growing on, and they are quite sensitive to air pollution. So they're a great indicator if a habitat is starting to decline. So there are many, many different types of lichens out there, about 20,000 species in total. And this is a group referred to as shield lichens. So there are multiple species. Many of them belong to the Parmelia genus. And if we look at the next slide, there we go. These are some examples I took from the trail in October. The first two are live specimens. So we can see the typical round shield shape. So think like Captain America's shield. That's a very typical shape. Here there's been some damage to the wood, so part of it's missing, but you can see the variation in color. Kind of a gray green over here, a little bit more vibrant green in this picture. And the third picture all the way to the right, this is a specimen that we have in the lab classroom. And over time, as they dry, they turn kind of a faded brown color. But what I want to point out is that all three of these are lichens basically come in three shapes: crustose, foliose, and fruticose. Shield lichens are all considered foliose lichens because they have what looks like overlapping foliage. So if we look, this is kind of like a little tiny leaf looking shape, and that's what foliage refers to. So these are foliose lichens. And then I just thought we would end on a fun note. So as I'm going through the trails and learning how to take the best sorts of pictures and the best types of videos, there's all kinds of screw ups along the way. So here's some fun shots from my photography season. Back in May, I like to refer to Witch Hazel Trail as the highway to hell because it's covered in mosquitoes. You literally have to jog through it constantly. And so here's a beautiful close-up of one of those mosquitoes on a hot, sweaty day back in May. This was an accidental selfie here back in June. Sometimes my dog accompanies me, so you can see a little bit of her. You can see I'm wearing my camera equipment kind of like a fanny pack. And then it got a lot colder by October, so I had lots of layers on for a cool rainy day when I took some of those pictures. So anyway, I hope that you enjoyed this exploration of fungi. Up next will be the animal kingdom.